Hi, I'm Mauro Porcini, PepsiCo's Chief Design Officer. Join me for our new series where we dive into the minds of the greatest innovators of our time, with the goal of finding what drives them in their professional journey and in their personal life, trying to uncover the universal truths that unite anyone attempting to have a meaningful impact in the world. This is In Your Shoes. I don't want iconic because of a look. I want iconic because it has made a difference. I'm quoting the guest of today. He's an architect and a founding partner of Rojkind Arquitectos, a Mexico City-based innovation firm focusing on design, business strategy, and experiential innovation. He's also one of 4 co-founders of the nonprofit organization MXDF Urban Research Center. His work has won numerous awards, and in 2019, he was named as Senior Vice President of Architecture of WeWork. According to Forbes, he's a representative of a Mexican generation of architects transforming his country. Michel Rojkind, welcome to In Your Shoes.
Hey, Mauro, thanks. Wonderful to be back.
Michel, you're saying it right, because this is the second time we record this podcast. The first time was actually not in a virtual way. It was done physically in our studio in the PepsiCo Design Center in New York City. Today, instead, I am in the Hamptons, 2 hours driving from New York. You are in Tulum, in beautiful, beautiful Tulum in Mexico. And we're having this conversation virtually because the conversation we had before was before the COVID pandemic, before the world changed once and for all. And especially thinking about the topic that we touched, the idea of architecture and people connecting with each other, many things has changed. And so we both thought it was probably ideal to re-record the podcast. We never launched it because of COVID. So here we are today. And in full disclosure, Michel is also a very good friend of mine. I know him very well, and I respect him and admire him for many different reasons. He inspires me not just as an architect or as an innovator, but as a human being. And today we'll try to make this aspect of Michel come out, because I think it's also relevant from an innovation standpoint, from a creative standpoint, and for any business working with creatives and innovators. So again, Michel, great pleasure to have you with us today.
Great to be here, even though I'm in Tulum. So let's
It's
start the
magic how you
conversation.
can connect with people wherever they are around the world. It became so natural and so quick in the past few months. Uh, Actually, you're in Tulum. You're in the middle of nature, in a place that is just amazing. And then you're coming back to another place that is amazing in so many different ways. That is New York City. Where do you find your inspiration? Does nature and being away from the city and people inspires you, or is the city and the people and the energy that you face there that inspires you? You always live in between the two worlds. Is really you.
Yeah, that's been a very interesting question for myself, Mauro. The idea of why do we think we need to go out and reconnect to nature when we should reconnect to nature every single day? And in fact, we shouldn't feel independent from nature. We shouldn't feel the need to reconnect because we are nature, no? So I think that inspiration, at least to me, it's kind of a mode that you turn on within yourself, saying like inspiration is not a 1 hour thing. Like, and I always mention this also, like your practice is not 1 hour of yoga or 1 hour of meditation. Your life becomes your practice. So if we understand how to turn on this mode of being aware of things, most everything will inspire you. It doesn't matter where you are, because you'll find inspiration in nature or you'll find inspiration in chaos. And I mean, coming from Mexico City, I was born and raised in Mexico City, and Mexico City is so chaotic that every day there is inspiration. So I think it's a matter of kind of fine tuning your senses or your antennas and just being open to the experience where you are. And I definitely say that, of course, chaotic experiences are inspiring, yes, they also get a little bit tiring and stressful because of the high energy vibrancy. So that's why I feel that as humans, we always kind of go back to the woods or to the sea or to some nature place that grounds us, no, that makes us come back to our roots and kind of find that little moment of peace and space within ourselves, kind of to rebalance this energy that has a crazier effect in chaotic places like New York. But I have to say that they're both inspiring. I think that having the privilege of being able to do that, I think it's really something that also you learn to use that in favor of, no? Um, because you and me also talked about how important it is to understand that, first of all, we, with the pandemic, we could isolate within our homes, but also having the possibility to grab a car and go to the beach, or grab a car and go somewhere, and also disconnect in a different environment. So both of them are incredibly powerful in terms of being inspired about something creative or something going on with the world that we're actually going through right now. All these changes, no?
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I said it earlier, you somehow said it as well. You are more than an architect. You are curious and interested on everything that's going on in the world. Actually, you did start in a different way. You didn't start as an architect right away. You were a musician, and actually a pretty renowned one in Mexico. So can you tell us more about your beginning and then how you moved from music to architecture?
Yes, I have to say that I was fortunate enough to sign with a record label at the age of 19. I was 19 years old when Virgin Records signed us with my band. I was a drummer. I say I was a drummer because I'm not playing drums anymore. I play now and then, but not professionally. But back then, I played professionally for. We cut 4 albums with Virgin Records. We did tours. We had videos in MTV, and it was an amazing roller coaster. It was an amazing ride to experience. Which, on one hand, I did not stop doing architecture. I started studying architecture at the same time where we were signing with the company. So I maintained both careers professionally parallel. Of course, doing the effort to maintain my school and doing the effort to maintain being okay with the touring and the concerts and the band, and trying to understand what gave to the other one. And it was very interesting because I remember, at least when I was studying architecture, that I liked architecture, but I was not fascinated with architecture at the beginning. What really started to make me feel fascinated about architecture was traveling with my band. When I was getting on a bus or getting on a plane, arriving in a new country, seeing airports, infrastructures, public spaces, housing, buildings, hotels, that started really making me open up to seeing the power of architecture, the power of city planning, and the power of designing things, and understanding what gave back to communities and what didn't give back to communities. Because also, I think that started informing or forming me as an architect to understand that I wanted to do things that gave something in return. But I didn't take any of them as a hobby, Mauro. I was very serious on both of them. I'm very fortunate to have this amazing mother that I grew up in a house where my father was a scientist. It is a National Science Prize liver disease researcher, and a mom who went to India to look for her guru. So this kind of split family of studying all the time, this knowledge, this researcher, and my mom talking about spirituality. And it was beautiful because my dad wanted me to pursue a very serious career, and my mom was, yes, but you should understand that if you have more options in your life, things will get better, because then if in architecture it doesn't go so well, you still have your music. But if music doesn't go so well, you still have your architecture. So I kind of had this beautiful balance that made a lot of sense to me back then, and now even more so. And it made the experience more powerful. It made the experience of being a musician more interesting, because I knew I was nourishing my brain and my creativity with architecture, and also the other way around. And it came to a point where I was very grateful with music, but I knew that I didn't want to be a musician for my whole lifetime in that serious way, because at least most of my friends in Mexico, Mauro, ended up being either producers for bands or maybe worked in a record label. But the actual beat player in a band like the Rolling Stones didn't happen in Mexico. I mean, you have a couple of bands that are still going, like the El Tri or some other bands, but I thought it was kind of a good idea to understand that I really had nourished and learned as much as I could during my those years from 18, 19 to maybe 25, 26 years old. And then I finally got a client that wanted me to do his house, which was funny because I was not pursuing clients. I was playing music, but I was doing this renovation for a friend, maybe his closet space, and then maybe a kitchen space, and then an apartment. And then somebody saw that apartment and looked for me. And when they actually looked for me, they're like, "Oh, where's your office?" And my office was a Macintosh. I just had my computer. I didn't have an office. But that kind of sparked the cue that made me realize that I really wanted now to commit to architecture. So I was not happy with the direction that the band was going anymore, and so I decided to quit the band and pursue a full-time career as an architect, and started my own firm back in 1998 or 1997, somewhere around there. It's been a long time now. But
There are many people that are in that kind of situation like you. They are doing something and then there is something else, and they feel that what they're doing is not really ideal. It could be at work, it could be in your private life, and they see that there is eventually another opportunity, but there is always the difficulty to take the decision, to act, to, on something that eventually you desire or you feel. So, and that's the reason why many people don't make that change. So what was that moment you're like, okay, I really need to do the switch, I really need to change? Was something that you found inside yourself, or something happened outside? Think about people that are right now in the same situation as you, and they need to take that decision. What advice would you give to them?
first of all, I've always followed my heart, and I've always followed what feels right within my heart. No, I've been fortunate enough to be very open and receptive in terms of energy, and feel things that then my mind comes into play, and then I can intellectualize what I'm feeling. No, but I that's why I always recommend people to practice things that create a sense of awareness, because the more that you're aware of how you see your world and the view of your things, will make you definitely make the better decisions or the best decisions. Because if you make a decision when you're mad, upset, depressed, or in a rush, you will probably make the wrong decision, because you're not actually letting yourself feel what is happening to you emotionally with the results. In my case in particular, and then I'll come to recommend something, but in my case in particular, Mauro, it happened parallel. While I was not happy with the way the band was going, because the band was a rock band that started becoming a pop band, and I didn't want to be in a pop band. I wanted to be in a rock band. So by the fourth album, where the lead singer was already planning to be a lead singer independently, him on his own without any band and blah, 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 the client looked for me to do his house in architecture. So it was like, oh, this is happening exactly at the right time. And I don't believe in coincidences at all. I think that things have an order and a structure, and they happen for a specific reason. So there was no coincidence that I was not excited anymore with the direction of the band, and suddenly a client appears and wants me to do his house. No, so any recommendation is just sit down and listen to yourselves, and listen to what feels right within you, and what feels right in terms of decision making. No, if you're going to be in a lousy job that you don't like but it pays you well, you're going to have to face the consequences, because you're going to be paid very well, but it's going to maybe rot your heart. No, and it's going to shrink your heart like a prune. But if you make a decision that your heart will grow, but there's not a lot of money involved, it might feel like the wrong decision. In my experience, at least in my life, the moment I've taken decisions out of heart, the money follows up. When you do things with your passion, when you do things with your heart, when you know that you're committed to something and you're coherent about the way you act in your life and the way you do what you do, no matter the profession, you'll eventually be okay. You'll eventually, there's something about making the right decisions from the right approach, or as I say, from the heart, that suddenly everything kind of falls in place, and it creates this sense of protection where money starts coming in, and there's a way to balance that off. And most of my friends that have make it that had taken decisions just for the money because they're going to be better, at some point they regret it, no, because they did make money but they're lousy, they feel bad, they messed up maybe their families because they took the wrong decision. But I would just say, practice more things that give you a sense of mindfulness and awareness to yourself. No.
You also have something that somehow is complementary to this and is unique to you. I think you are aware of it, but we never talk about this. But is your ability to think big. And it came up to my mind when you mentioned the fact that, well, in Mexico, the probability to become the Rolling Stones were not very high. So I was like, oh, who would think when you create a band to become the Rolling Stone? You know, but that's you think in the way. There was COVID and you reach out to me, you know, with ideas to change the world, to go to the United Nations, and you came to New York, and there are amazing artists and you don't know. And I remember conversation where like, well, let's go meet this person, I'm gonna write to this person. Nothing is impossible, right? You always think big. And how important it is to think big, to change the world. We do innovation in companies like PepsiCo, for instance. You know, we drive innovation, and it's so important to think in that way, to not be trapped in the day-to-day, not be trapped in the year cycle of your job, in the rotation of your job, but really think beyond the boundaries that society somehow imposed to you. So how important is being for you to think in that way?
Well, I think that personally, when I started studying architecture, I didn't study architecture to be a Mexican architect, Mauro. I studied architecture to become an architect, and I played drums to be a drummer. So this whole thing about nationalism, or where you are, or borders, or walls within borders, I never understood that. Even now, with the pandemic, I think that this whole thing about, I mean, we could have saved so many lives if we would have had more cooperation amongst nations, and we didn't, because we're still playing this game of borders and nationalism. And I will tell you what I want to tell you, but I won't tell you everything. So that delay, or that lost in translation, has created many problems amongst us. So I don't know why, since I was a kid, I didn't think of me in a local way. I didn't think of, yes, I'm going to do this in my little town, or in my little country, or in my big country. I always thought of, maybe as a kid, that when you go out and play, you don't think who you're going to play with, and you don't prejudge the guy you're going to play with. You just go out and play. And the same thing happened, at least to me, with music, Mauro, that when you're a musician, you might have your band, but if somebody plays amazing on stage, you want to play with that guy, because you see a guitar player that's amazing, and you're like, oh, I would love to jam with this guy because I'm a drummer. And why I want to play with this guy is I'm going to learn by playing with this guy. I'm going to up my game if I play with somebody that's a better player than I am. And that started following up in sports as well. When I was doing taekwondo or mountain biking, I remember I would want to go into the classes of the more advanced people, because I was going to get maybe beaten up faster by the taekwondo guys that were better than me, but I would learn faster to be able to stand up to these older generations of guys that were already there. And in the same way, I would always talk with my brothers and sisters or friends, like, guys, let's sit down with the best people on the planet. I don't care where they're from. And even before, Mauro, I mean, there wasn't as fast communication as now, social media. I remember starting doing projects in architecture where I would reach out to my heroes. And in this case, Cecil Balmont, an amazing structural engineer who has done one of some of the most amazing projects in the world, who was working with Arup at that time. and did an amazing part of the company called the Advanced Geometry Unit, where they were doing these crazy research about structures and buildings. And and I remember reaching out to him when we shortlisted for a competition. And I said, I don't have anything to lose. I'm going to send him an email. And I sent him an email. Dear Cecil, I would love to work with you. I admire your work as an engineer. I'm a Mexican architect, blah, blah, blah. We're shortlisted for this competition. Long story short, he replied. And we entered the competition. We didn't win, but we became good friends. So I started getting confident about reaching out to people, because if you have the only thing that we have to remember that is really important, if you're reaching out to somebody, it's important to bring something to the table. If you don't have a good conversation, if you don't have good ideas, if you don't have good curiosity, people won't listen to you. But if you reach out to somebody because you're curious and you're trying to think of something that eventually will make a difference, people will listen. And again, it comes back to, does it feel good in the heart? What you're doing, is it really from the heart, or is it from your ego? Are you doing it because of this character that you're building for yourself that you don't know who that is? Or are you really open and honest and in a very generous way to invite people to work with you? Because I know friends that call people up and they invite them to work, but then they tell them what to do. So it's like, why are you inviting somebody to pitch in with ideas and then you're going to tell him exactly what to do? Then don't invite a creative person. Invite somebody that just takes orders and can fill out the form the way you wanted it to be filled. But if you're inviting people to play or jam or do this work that is not yours, but it's a group or a more people involved process, then you're doing it the wrong way. So invite people to play in that sense. And that's why I always come back to the kids, no, not kids in an immature way, but kids in a more energetic way, where you're playful and curious, and that creates these type of relationships. And the funny, or the most beautiful part of this, friends that I've reached out to over time, Mauro, is that we've become friends. We found out that it was not only about the work, it was more about the way we thought, no? In the case of Bjarke Ingels, or the case of Stefan Sagmeister, that first it was like, wow, let's do something together. And it's like, you know what? Let's just be friends and have these amazing conversations. And if we work, yes, that's good. If we don't work, it's okay, no?
And that's so important, to start with that authentic, sincere, kind purpose and intent, one of growing together, have fun together, and bettering each other. That's so important to drive results. And on what you say, there is another element you didn't mention, but is really you, and is the idea of respect. Is you are respecting the people you are connecting with. Often we don't respect each other. A manager doesn't respect the other manager. A community of designers don't respect the business community, and vice versa. We invite agencies and partners and we don't listen to them. We impose them certain directions. What you're talking about is this idea of respecting each other and being open to empower the other party to take his or her value to the table. So you mentioned the need of us to bring something to the table. There is also the need of us to respect the other, to let the other bring that something to the table, right?
Yeah, and this comes back to, it's interesting, and people might not know this about me. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm separated from my first wife, which is Claudia. But it starts even from there, Mauro. When I split up with Claudia, is my best friend. I have to also say that she's become my really, really best friend over time, and she's my ex-wife. And there's people that don't even get along with their exes. But even from that, like, super tight family circle, the moment we split up, we told each other that if there was going to be somebody in her life and there was going to be somebody in my life, we should think about what they would add to the family. And if that they didn't add to the family, they were not invited. And that was kind of like the agreement, no? You can choose anybody you want, but if they add something, that's a beautiful thing. So I took that into heart as well. And with everything I do, if I'm working, I always say the open, it's an open invitation to sit down at this table. Just think what you're going to bring to the table, because you're going to eat amazing food. We're going to take care of you. We're going to do, yes. But what do you want to do? You want to wash the dishes. You want to bring the wine. You're going to bring the dessert. You're going to put the music in the background. So if we all put a little bit in that table, it's a better environment to work in. So again, it's like when you're inviting somebody, let them grow, let them put something, and let them create a platform or an environment so people can grow and nourish from there. So it's like an empty box, and you say, "What are you putting in the box?" Okay, put trust, put fun, put all the ingredients that you want. But every now and then, look at the box so it's not empty anymore because everybody took out all the little pieces. So again, it all comes back to two things, Mauro. To one, the more you're aware of yourself and your experience during this lifetime as a human being, the better it's going to be, because you're going to create better results. And the second is that I, of course, love the idea that we were fortunate enough to study different careers, but during difficult times, most of my decisions come from a human perspective rather than the architect who studied architecture, no? And even more so with this pandemic, and we talked about this, Mauro. Once the pandemic started creating an effect in the world in general, I remember first of all telling my people, okay, go to your homes, lock down, I mean, quarantine. You'll still get paid. We'll figure out a way to connect. The service people that helped us even clean, I gave them 3 months away, paid leave. Go to your families. And my people, I remember my staff saying, like, what are we going to do about how can we help with architecture and with urbanism? I said, guys, let's help as humans. First of all, if we're fortunate enough to be at home, how can we be of service to others by thinking from a human perspective, first of all? Then we can put the hat on of the architect and the politician or the landscape designer or the urban planner or the whatever you want. First of all, it's how can we help as humans? Because first of all, we are humans in this planet. And then, yeah, you studied one career, I studied another career, but it has to come out of that. It has to come from a place where we understand that we're in this position right now because we didn't pay attention to our humanity. We didn't pay attention to the other. We went off this roller coaster of speed, of decisions, of systemic mistakes that kept on growing, that I always mention that with or without COVID-19, we were actually going to face something like this. So it was actually COVID-19 that made us kind of maybe wake up a little in our awareness to what's going on, and to really think if we're part of the problem or we're part of the solution, Mauro, which I think is the main question that we should all be asking ourselves.
So let me ask you something about COVID-19 and the impact on the society that is having. You are the lead of architecture, the head of architecture of a company like WeWork, and then you have your own architecture firm. Do you think the way people will interact in the workspace is going to change? Is going to change temporarily and then going back to where we were before, or is going to change permanently, if it's going to change?
No, I think it's going to change permanently. In what sense? It's going to change permanently that, first of all, we're acknowledging how little we use our own homes. We're acknowledging that we have breakfast, leave the house, and then come back at night. So your house is empty for how many hours? Which doesn't make sense, because the cost of the rent that you're paying for your house and the cost you're paying for an office. So we're going to be more efficient on that. I think we're going to see time hacking. And what do I mean by time hacking? We're going to see people creating shifts. So you're going to get the morning shift or the night shift. So you're going to be able to work from your home a certain amount of hours. So there is less commuting, and there's less traffic, and there's less pollution. And we're going to fix a lot of the different things that I think we're creating the problem. And we've also talked about this, Mauro, even just the idea of summer vacations. Why does the complete world need to go on vacations on summer? So those are the 2 months that become the worst months for traveling, the worst months for enjoying an experience of being connected to some beautiful nature place, because everything is packed, everything is expensive. We all try to commute at the same time. So there's people right now even talking that vacations are going to start being shifts, where certain countries go on the 2 month vacations, maybe in January, February, then 2 months for another country, 2 months for another country, and you stabilize a tourism year-round economy. So it doesn't spike only in Easter, summer, and then December or New Year's. So it starts to balance. And the same thing with again, the house. The house will, you'll start seeing transformations within the house. Workspaces will still be workspaces, but I'm seeing beautiful. I'm seeing two different experiences. One experience, which I think is really bad, is when people are designing based on fear, where you're seeing like, yes, it looks creative, but I hate those examples, because like, I don't want to go to a restaurant and be in an acrylic cabin talking to my friend Mauro, because it's going to kill the experience of being in a restaurant. I want to be in a restaurant where I can be with my friends and listen to them and understand them. And one thing is being careful, and the other thing is really making sure that whatever we design doesn't kill our freedom and is not jeopardizing how free we are as humans. And I'll just use one simple example. Before 9/11 and after 9/11, the flight experience and traveling. I mean, not traveling after 9/11 became awful for everybody. Everybody was treated now like a possible criminal. So even the way you enter an airport, the way you're scanned, the long it takes for you to get from. I mean, now we have to plan that it's a one complete day of lost time for traveling, and it came out of after that incident that of course something needed to change. But if everything now becomes based on fear that yes, you could be of course doing something wrong, but for one person everybody else is going to pay for that, so the whole experience of traveling changed. What are the experiences that are going to manifest today in the world out of COVID-19 that we'll regret later that changed, because now you don't want to even say hi to the hostess at the entrance of a restaurant, because she's the other one that you have to fear now, no, because she can infect you with something. So there's those two sides, the one based on fear, and some beautiful options where you're seeing office buildings where they're, instead of creating terraces towards the outside, if they're existing buildings, they're pushing terraces towards the inside, Mauro, adding vegetation, opening natural ventilation, so you're more connected to nature. You're more connected to certain conditions that give us strength as humans. Because if we're isolated all the time, of course, when we go out to the natural world, we're going to get, I don't know how many different things. And it's like kids, when kids are little and put their fingers in mud and then they lick their fingers, they're just creating antibodies to become like stronger beings, no? But if you isolate them like the boy in the bubble, of course, when he breathes natural air, he's going to get sick. So it's interesting to see how things are changing. I'm excited also, Mauro, about options happening in Europe where a restaurant can only, if a restaurant had like maybe 50 tables on the inside, and now they can open maybe with 10 or 20 tables. So the agreement or relationship with the government is like, okay, open up with 20 tables on the inside. We'll close the street on the outside, make it pedestrian so there's no cars, and take the other tables outside. And they're doing that. And once they're doing that, the community is saying like, wait, I don't want cars to pass here anymore. This is beautiful because we're taking the streets. Can we object to having cars pass? And there's government saying, okay, we're going to shut down those streets. We're going to make them pedestrian, and we're going to have this outdoor life. So I think it's a balance of how much indoor, outdoor, how more open space. Are we going to run away to hide from the chaotic conditions of cities to kind of feel more connected to nature? Or are we going to connect nature to chaotic environments to create a balance? And I think that's kind of where the world is heading right now. It's like we went the wrong direction because we're stressing ourselves out to then have to go and breathe a little bit air on our secluded area in nature to come back and keep on rushing like crazy. So this slowdown, at least for me, just, I mean, it just hit the right places. I mean, and again, I have to say that I'm fortunate to be a person that could stay at home and can be with my daughter and not have to be fighting out there, like the doctors are doing, or all the service areas that I mean, they're the frontline workers that all my respect to them. But even questioning, do we want to go as fast as we were going, or do we want to slow down and reconnect and rebalance many things, because we cannot go back to normal at all.
You think you mentioned some of the changes that we're going to see in the cities. We are a company working food and beverage, and we are trying to understand how people will eat and drink in the future. And obviously, we were living in a world where people will go to work in the morning and stay all day at work, and then go back at night, and you would have a break during the day to go eventually to a restaurant. I'm thinking about the city center of cities like New York, Milan, where I come from, I guess also Mexico City, where you are from. And now these cities are really different. The mayor of Milan a few weeks ago asked people to go back, to some form of working from the office, but he was voicing the restaurants and all those activities that were suffering for not having people in the city. So sooner or later, people will go back somehow in the city, but with this shift you were talking about earlier, with this kind of hybrid working that we keep talking about, do you think this will redesign the cities as well, the city life as well? For instance, you mentioned that the restaurants, well, will have open space outside of the restaurant, but we had enough restaurant to serve all the people that were in the city. If there are half of the people, do we need all those restaurants? And if we don't anymore, they will be replaced with what? How our cities will change, if they will change?
No, they definitely will. We're gonna understand how I mean, just the excess itself, excess of food, excess of fashion, excess of building, excess of how many things. And again, we also talked about this, Maro, and I can't remember the economist that was saying, it's incredible to see that everybody's talking about this big recession that's going to hit. But now that most people are being quarantined and only buying the essentials, why is there going to be a recession if they're buying the essentials? What were we buying before? So that means that we're spending all this amount of money on useless things or excessive things, and doing more buildings for more housing and more buildings for office space and more, even before utilizing what we already have. So again, there is no balance of what exists, what can we transform of what exists, instead of just giving more permits and more permits, and because it creates an economy based on what? So when we talk about systemic, and we can get into, I mean, we can talk about systemic injustice of everything going on now with the protests, to systemic ways of even making an economy work in certain countries. We have to come back and reframe that, because that's creating a huge problem. But in the immediate response, for instance, I think in working in WeWork, I think that what's happening now, and that most big companies cannot force their people to go to a specific building in the middle of the city because they all need to commute from different places. WeWork is becoming a great option because we have so many buildings spread out in the city that it just makes total sense to walk to the place that's closest to you. I don't care. Check into any office space, just check in, and we'll all interconnect from where we are. And I don't have to make you go into the subway. I don't have to make you commute for 2 hours. And it starts kind of making a logic sense of understanding how to use your cities. And again, we all know European cities that depending on where you live, you cannot send your kids to a school that you want. You send your kids to the school that corresponds to your zip code. Otherwise, you cannot travel the distance because you're going to create traffic. You're going to create this chaos where if you have a good foundation, things kind of make much better sense. But definitely, we're going to see big changes, Mauro. I think that this eventually is hitting hard the local economy, the small entrepreneurs. I mean, even what we do in architecture, I always try to find out ways, if we're working with big companies, how does a big company subsidize a smaller company to give them an opportunity to really thrive and survive. No, so it was interesting for me in Mexico to see how my friends that are in the gastronomical business kind of react in a very quick way that friends of mine in New York couldn't, because what happened in Mexico is that, for instance, the big or the well-known restaurants, small businesses but well-known chefs, once they had to shut down for COVID, they found out how to make a delivery service where they were doing breakfast, lunch, dinners, and then they said, well, what do I do with my waiters? So they said, okay, you're gonna have to deliver the food. Are you willing to sacrifice for a couple of months to shift what you were doing as a waiter now to be part of a team that you're gonna deliver food to houses in order for us to thrive during these 2 or 3 months or 4 months or whatever, how long this takes, just to gap or bridge the gap, no? So they were very resilient, and they really, first of all, created a presence within the community. You were happy to see the waiters that you know from the restaurants now knocking on your door, bringing the food, and found a way to react, which friends of mine in New York couldn't do that model because they needed to ask for a special permit to become a restaurant that could deliver food, which I don't know how the permit works in terms of the gastronomical scene in New York, but it was not as agile as our third world country in Mexico, which most of the time, a lot of first world countries look at third world countries to figure out how we're dealing with crisis and chaos, and how are we resilient to even learn from that, because that even shows a fragile system that's put in place that makes things very rigid. That's why I say it's important to come back to systemic things that are wrong and how we can rebalance or at least recalibrate to make sense of a new direction. No.
You say something so important, the ability of a country or people or any community to look at that diverse community, a different community, and eventually with open eyes and open hearts and learn from them. Often there is so much disconnection that sometimes, unfortunately, ends up even in racism or other form of hate that we see everywhere in the society. Well, in reality, there would be so much to learn from each other if we, once again, would be open to look at others with respect. You mentioned the difference between developed countries and developing countries. So many times developed countries look at developing countries in ways like, well, you have so much to learn from me, developed country, while in reality, there is so much to learn from the diversity of the two systems in both directions. I have one last question. In your last answer, you mentioned, you use a word, pollution and abundance. Obviously, as a company in food and beverage, in packaged goods, we are really sensitive to this topic. Our CEO Ramon Laguarta in the past few years has been doubling down our investments in the world of sustainability. What's your point of view on sustainability in the world of architecture, but in general, creativity, design? How can we as innovators in this world push sustainability in the right way, but also in the conscious way, understanding what are the boundaries, the constraints, not in a naive way, but really in a way that can change progressively the world?
Well, first of all, I think that at least in architecture, I knew it made me very uncomfortable when people were talking about sustainability and things about being self-sufficient, because we kept on talking about self still, and it was uncomfortable, and it made me mad, because it was like, what, if we really want to be sustainable, why are we talking about self-sufficient? I'd rather talk about what I can do for the others rather than that. Yes, I'm creating a net zero building where all my energy is balanced to a net zero. It's like, well, that's great, but I would love to see a new generation where your building gives light to this community next to you that doesn't have money to pay for their own light, because it's a slum area that can't afford, they don't even have electricity to connect to. So what happens when your building gives water to my community, when your building gives light to my community, when it gives power to my community? We should be thinking that way, where it's like, is your building giving something? No, then you don't get to build it. Out. Next one. That should be regulated. It should be a law.
Beautiful.
So if every building was responsible for giving something to the community, and I'm not saying only in taxes, no, because people would say, yes, that's why you pay your tax, and then your tax goes to the city. No, no, no. I'm saying besides the taxes you need to pay, why aren't we on top of systems that make our buildings create value for others? So that's what I'm saying about the responsibility, or a shared responsibility that we all have. So from buildings that add value to cities, but as humans, that I don't care where you work, Mauro, are you a good human or you're not a good human? We should start understanding what's the value of that. Not only how you work on your 9 to 5 job, and you make things. It's like, it's your everyday. And coming back again to your life is your practice. If you don't understand your life as a practice of your values, as a practice of what you're fighting for, you're getting it wrong, because it has to be about the way you interact with the world in everything that you do, not on your 9 to 5 job, not on your 1 hour gym thing, not on your retreat to the beach. It's on your everyday, all these conversations. It should be about adding value to the next conversation. We're planting seeds that will eventually grow in other people's minds and spark conversations on their own. So I think sustainability is about, first of all, acknowledging if we are part of the problem or part of the solution, because all of us have part of the problem and all of us are part of the solution as well. So I think with awareness, we can actually go back a little bit and understand, more so than not, I want to be part of the solution and less part of the problem. So I'm going to work on the things that I'm doing that I definitely know that will make a better future and make things right, and stop doing the ones that, oops, I didn't know that they were creating this problem. But you have to take a couple of steps back to understand it, because I think that the real problem with this model is the specialization on things. I'm so specialized in the things that I do that I don't think about the rest. And we talked about this. I do bottles for caps for bottles, no? So you might be the best guy doing the caps for the bottles, but you don't know if the bottle has water or cyanide. So you can say you're the guy doing the best caps for bottles, but you have to understand what's the bigger picture on that. So it's just having this awareness. What are the things that help and what are the things that not help? And how do we spark responsibility in a shared way, where we all want the same thing? I mean, we all want a better world. We all want this relationship to the other in a better, well, not all of us, but I really hope that with this awakening that's going on, more people are going to want to connect in a truer, in a more awakened way. And I think this is what we're seeing in the world right now. This waking up that's shaking so many pillars of our society to really question what we need today and where we want to go.
Well, Michel, this is wonderful. We talked about business, we talked about innovation, we talked about creativity, design, architecture, but we did it through the lens of people, right? We use words like empathy, love, respect, and this is what innovation and business and progress in society is about, right? It's people creating some form of value for other people. And we should talk more in any kind of environment about this kind of values, about empathy, love, kindness, respect, because are really the driver of innovation and are really what we all need and deserve in our journey that we call life. So, Michel, I didn't expect anything less from this conversation. We could go on and on for hours, but it's time to wrap up. I just want to thank you for sharing your ideas and your emotions as well. And I hope to see you soon in New York. Thank you, Michel.
Thanks, Mauro. Pleasure being here with you and talking about that. At least some of the things that to us resonate more, which is how we're growing as human beings and how we're being more, at least responsible for the day-to-day thing, and and having more awareness. And I know that you're there, and I know that I'm there, and I know that's what keeps our friendship going. That we're humans, that we want to grow in the right way. We want to learn more to be better responding in what we do. So thank you, Mauro. A pleasure always.
Thank you, Michel.